Welcome to Marple Whispers, where every hushed word drips with menace. I'm Sean, your companion in a world of veiled glances and poisoned promises. Miss Marple sees what others miss. Will you? The game is afoot, and the stakes are deadly. In the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, a deadly whisper arrived by post. Mysterious postcards with cryptic warnings laced with secrets from the past. But when spinster shopkeeper Lavinia Price collapses in agony, her skin turning blue from poisoned ink, the quaint facade shatters. Enter Miss Jane Marple, the unassuming elderly sleuth with a razor-sharp mind, unravelling a web of hidden grudges, switched envelopes, and a fatal mix-up at the post office. Was the venom meant for the blustery Colonel Bantry, haunted by his Indian scandal, or the nervous chemist hiding embezzled funds? As shadows creep and threats slip under doors, Marple exposes the true killer, a vengeful young man seeking family justice, whose scare tactic turns to murder. Hold your breath. This is no ordinary postcard. It's a ticket to betrayal, poison, and shocking revelations that will keep you guessing till the final twist. Chapter 1. The Arrival of the Postcards. The village of St. Mary Mead nestled in the gentle folds of the English countryside, a place where time seemed to linger like morning mist over the meadows. Autumn had painted the hedgerows in fiery hues of red and gold, and the air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves. Yet, beneath this serene facade, an undercurrent of intrigue was about to surface, one that would shatter the village's placid routine. Miss Jane Marple, an elderly spinster with a mind as sharp as her knitting needles, sat by the lace-curtained window of her cosy cottage. Her fingers moved rhythmically, crafting a delicate pink shawl for her nephew's latest offspring, but her keen blue eyes were fixed on the world outside. She had always found that observation was the key to understanding human nature, and today her vigilance was rewarded. Down the winding lane came the postman, Mr. Polk, his bicycle creaking under the weight of his leather satchel. He pedalled with his usual deliberate pace, but Miss Marple noted a certain hesitation in his stops. First, he paused at the vicarage, handing a slim envelope to Mrs. Elspeth Dane, the vicar's wife, who accepted it with a polite nod before retreating indoors. Next, at the chemist's shop, Mr. Thomas Ridley emerged, wiping his hands on his white coat, and took his mail with a furtive glance around. Miss Marple's gaze narrowed as Mr. Polk continued to the village shop, where Miss Lavinia Price, a wiry woman with pince-nez perched on her nose, snatched her delivery with eager fingers. Finally, the postman veered toward Melchett Manor, the grandest house in the village, delivering to Colonel Arthur Bantry, who boomed a hearty greeting that echoed down the lane. What caught Miss Marple's attention most were the identical postcards each had received. Flat, colourful rectangles glimpsed briefly before being pocketed. She had seen such cards before, cheap souvenirs from seaside resorts, but these bore an air of mystery. No stamps, she mused, and no handwritten addresses. They must have been dropped directly at the post office. By midday, whispers began to circulate. At the Blue Boar Inn, villagers gathered over pints, exchanging tales. Mine said, "A secret awaits you," confided one farmer, his voice low. "Cryptic, ain't it?" Another nodded, revealing his own message, "Your time is near." Excitement mingled with unease. Who could be behind such enigmatic missives? Theories flew. A prankster, perhaps, or a harbinger of scandal. Miss Marple, ever discreet, ventured out for her afternoon walk, pausing to chat with neighbours. She learned that the postcards featured bland images of Brighton piers or Blackpool towers, with messages typed in stark, mechanical letters. No sender's name, no clue to their origin. The village hummed with speculation, each recipient pondering what hidden truth might lurk behind the words. But dawn the following day brought horror. Miss Lavinia Price, bustling in her shop as always, slit open her postcard amid the scent of fresh bread and polished counters. Her customers watched as she read, her face draining of colour. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. She clutched at her throat, her eyes widening in terror. The card fluttered to the floor as she crumpled beside it, her body convulsing briefly before going still. Word spread like wildfire. Dr. Haydock, summoned in haste, arrived too late. Miss Price was beyond help. The village reeled, faces pale at garden gates, conversations hushed in shock. Who could have foreseen that a harmless piece of card would carry death? That afternoon, Miss Marple accepted an invitation to tea at the vicarage. Mrs. Dane, her hands trembling as she poured from the china pot, could speak of nothing else. "It's unimaginable, Jane." Lavinia was in fine spirits just yesterday, chattering about her new stock of ribbons. And now, gone in an instant. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her expression mild, but her mind raced. The postcards, so innocuous at first glance, now seemed laced with menace. Why these particular villagers? And what deadly secret had claimed poor Miss Price? As the clock ticked softly on the mantel, Miss Marple's needles resumed their quiet dance, weaving patterns as intricate as the puzzle unfolding before her. Chapter 2. The Inquest and the Ink, the village hall of St. Mary Mead, usually a venue for jumble sales and amateur theatricals, had transformed into a sombre chamber of inquiry. Benches creaked under the weight of curious villagers, their faces a mosaic of shock, curiosity, and thinly veiled excitement. Sunlight filtered through dusty windows, casting elongated shadows that danced like spectres across the wooden floor. At the front, a makeshift dais held the coroner's table, draped in a faded green cloth, with a stern-faced Mr. Grimsby presiding. He was a man of middle age, with wire-rimmed spectacles and a penchant for precision, imported from the county town of Much Benham for such grave occasions. Miss Jane Marple arrived early, slipping into a seat at the back with the unobtrusive grace of one accustomed to observing without being observed. Her black dress and sensible hat blended seamlessly with the crowd, but her eyes, bright and alert, missed nothing. She noted the cluster of recipients, Mrs. Elspeth Dane clutching a handkerchief, her vicar husband beside her with a furrowed brow, Mr. Thomas Ridley, the chemist, fidgeting with his cufflinks, his face pale as parchment, and Colonel Arthur Bantry, seated rigidly, his military moustache twitching with suppressed indignation. The air hummed with whispered speculations, a low buzz that ceased abruptly as Mr. Grimsby rapped his gavel. "The inquest into the death of Miss Lavinia Price is now open," he announced, his voice echoing with authority. "We shall proceed with the evidence." First came the identification. Miss Price's nephew, a lanky young man from London named Harold, stepped forward. He was visibly shaken, his tie askew, as he confirmed her identity. Aunt Lavinia was 58, lived alone above the shop, healthy as a horse, or so I thought. His voice cracked, and he was dismissed with a nod. Next, the witnesses to the tragedy. Mrs. Amelia Croft, a stout woman who had been buying tea at the shop, recounted the scene with dramatic flair. She was chatting away, cheerful as you please, about the weather and all. Then she picks up that postcard from the counter. Must have come in the morning post. Opens it, reads it, and suddenly her face goes all queer, like she'd seen a ghost. Clutching her chest, she was, gasping for air. Down she went, right there among the biscuits and tins. We tried to help, but it was no use. Gone in moments. The coroner leaned forward. Did she say anything? Any words at all? Mrs. Croft shook her head. Just a sort of choke, like she couldn't breathe. Horrible it was. Other customers corroborated her account, adding details that painted a vivid picture. The postcard fluttering to the floor, its seaside image mocking the horror. Miss Price's fingers twitching as life ebbed away. The hall grew tense, the villagers shifting uncomfortably, aware that death had brushed too close. Dr. Haydock took the stand next, his medical bag at his feet, exuding the calm competence of a seasoned practitioner. He was a tall man, with greying hair and a reassuring manner, well liked in St. Mary Mead. I arrived within 10 minutes of the call, he stated. Miss Price was already deceased. No pulse, no respiration. Her skin showed signs of cyanosis, bluish tint around the lips and nails, suggestive of asphyxia. But there were no obvious injuries or marks of violence. Mr. Grimsby adjusted his spectacles. Cause of death, doctor. Pending full post-mortem, but initial examination points to poisoning. Likely a rapid-acting toxin, absorbed quickly. The symptoms, sudden collapse, respiratory distress. A line with cyanide or something similar. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cyanide? In sleepy St. Mary Mead? Miss Marple's knitting needles paused in her lap. She had suspected as much, recalling tales from her youth of poisons in unexpected places. The coroner pressed on. Any idea how it was administered? Dr. Haydock glanced at the postcard, now exhibited on the table, sealed in a clear envelope, possibly through contact. If the ink or paper was treated, handling it could transfer the poison to the skin, especially if there were cuts or if she touched her mouth afterward. The inquest adjourned briefly for lunch, but the villagers lingered, clustering in groups. Miss Marple overheard snatches of conversation. Who'd want to harm old Lavinia? Those postcards, everyone got one, didn't they? She slipped away quietly, her mind turning over the doctor's words. Poison in the ink, a devilish method, impersonal yet intimate. Upon resumption, the police chemist from Much Benham, a bespectacled expert named Mr. Wilkins, presented his findings. He was a precise man, with charts and samples, his testimony laced with technical terms that drew puzzled looks from the audience. The postcard in question, he began holding up a magnified photograph, bears a typed message, "Your past catches up." The ink used for the typing contains traces of potassium cyanide, compounded with a volatile solvent to facilitate absorption through the skin. It's a clever concoction, odorless, colourless once dry, but lethal upon prolonged contact. Mr. Grimsby interrupted. Prolonged? How long? Minutes, perhaps, if the victim handled it extensively, or if the skin was moist. Cyanide inhibits cellular respiration, leading to rapid death. And the other postcards? The coroner asked, gesturing to a bundle on the table. Mr. Wilkins shook his head. Examined them all. Only this one, addressed to Miss Price, shows contamination. The others are clean, ordinary ink. This revelation sent a shockwave through the hall. So it was targeted, not random. Eyes darted to the other recipients who shifted uneasily. Colonel Bantry harumphed loudly, his face reddening. Mrs. Dane whispered a prayer, her fingers twisting the handkerchief. Inspector Derek Craddock, a young officer from the county police, was called next. He was modern in his methods, with a notebook full of jottings and a keen eye for detail. "We've interviewed the postman, Mr. Polk. The postcards arrived in a plain envelope at the post office, no stamp, likely hand-delivered overnight, sorted and distributed the morning." "Any fingerprints?" Grimsby queried. "None usable on the cards, smudged or absent. The typewriter used is common, but we're tracing possible sources." The inquest concluded with a verdict of murder by person or persons unknown. The jury, a mix of local farmers and tradesmen, nodding solemnly. As the crowd dispersed, the air thick with unanswered questions, Miss Marple made her way to Melchett Manor. The Bantrys had invited her for tea, an invitation she accepted with her usual politeness, knowing it would yield insights. Melchett Manor stood at the end of a tree-lined drive, its Georgian facade imposing yet welcoming. Dolly Bantry, the Colonel's wife, greeted her at the door, her plump figure enveloped in a floral dress. "Jane, dear, come in, come in. What a dreadful business this is. Arthur's in a state, raging about cowardly poisoners and such." They settled in the drawing-room, with its chintz sofas and silver tea service. Colonel Bantry paced by the fireplace, his boots thudding on the carpet. "Damned outrage, Miss Marple! Poison in the post! Who ever heard of such a thing? In my day, men faced their enemies squarely." Miss Marple accepted a cup of tea, her demeanour serene. "Indeed, Colonel, but poison is often the weapon of the cunning, not the brave. Tell me, what was on your postcard?" Bantry halted, pulling the card from his pocket. "Here, truth will out. Cryptic rot. Threw me for a loop, I admit. Thought it was some jokester at first." Dolly leaned forward, her eyes wide. "We all got them, didn't we?" Elspeth Dane said, "Judgment Day approaches." Poor thing was terrified. And Ridley's, something about sins of the past. He's been jumpy ever since. Miss Marple sipped thoughtfully. Personal messages, yet vague enough to unsettle, as if the sender knew just enough to prod old wounds. The Colonel snorted. "Wounds? Bah! Lavinia Price was a busybody, always poking into folks' affairs. Probably trod on someone's toes." "But why the others?" Miss Marple murmured. "Why include you, or Mrs. Dane, or Mr. Ridley? Unless it's a smokescreen to hide the true target." Dolly gasped. "You mean one of us was meant to die, but it went wrong?" "Possible," Miss Marple said mildly. "Or perhaps a warning that turned deadly for poor Miss Price." Their conversation turned to village gossip. Dolly recounted Ridley's recent argument with Giles Corey, the farmer. Over some bill, Corey accused him of overcharging for cattle medicine, threatened to take his business elsewhere. Ridley went white as a sheet. "And Mrs. Dane?" Miss Marple inquired. "Oh, she's been worried about the vicar's health." "But that postcard, she thinks it's about some old parish scandal. You remember, years ago, funds went missing from the church roof fund. Never solved." Colonel Bantry chuckled. "Ancient history, but these postcards stir up mud, don't they?" Miss Marple nodded, her mind cataloguing these tidbits. As she left Melchett Manor, the sun dipping low, she pondered the ink's lethality. Cyanide, available to a chemist like Ridley, or perhaps a farmer with pesticides, or even a vicar with access to odd substances. The next day dawned crisp, and Miss Marple paid a call on Inspector Craddock at the Blue Boar, where he had set up a temporary office. He was polite, if a tad condescending, viewing her as a harmless old lady. "Miss Marple?" "Ah, yes, the Chief Constable mentioned you. Sharp as a tack, he said." She smiled modestly. "Merely observant, Inspector." "Have you considered the post office? How the cards were handled?" Craddock nodded. "Young Elsie Holland sorted them. Says they came in a bundle. No envelope, actually. Just slipped under the door. She distributed them without much thought. And no one else touched them. Apparently not. But we're checking alibis." Miss Marple left him to his work, her steps leading to the chemist's shop. Mr. Ridley was behind the counter, compounding pills, his hands steady but his eyes shadowed. "Good morning, Mr. Ridley." A sad affair, this. He looked up, startled. "Oh, Miss Marple. Yes, dreadful. Poor Lavinia. Your postcard. May I see it?" He hesitated, then produced it. "The reckoning comes. Made my blood run cold." She examined it closely, noting the typeface. "Typed, like the others. Do you own a typewriter?" "No, but I borrowed the vicarage one last week for inventory." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed? And cyanide? You handle such things?" "For prescriptions, yes, but strictly controlled." His voice sharpened. "You're not suggesting—" "Of course not," she soothed. "Merely curious." As she departed, Ridley watched her go, his expression uneasy. Miss Marple walked thoughtfully home, piecing fragments together. The ink, the messages, the mix of targets. It pointed to a deeper motive, perhaps a shared secret among the recipients. That evening, a knock at her door revealed Mrs. Dane, her face etched with worry. "Jane, I had to come. That postcard. It's haunting me. Judgment Day. What if it's about the vicar's old trouble?" Miss Marple invited her in, offering sherry. "What trouble, Elspeth?" Mrs. Dane sighed. "Years ago, before we came here, there was an incident. A parishioner accused him of impropriety. Nothing proven, but the rumour lingered. Lavinia knew. She was there. A connection," Miss Marple murmured. "And Ridley. He supplied medicines during that time. Perhaps he knows something." As Mrs. Dane left, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting forgotten. The web was tightening, threads linking the villagers in unexpected ways. But the poison, why only one card, unless a mistake? The following morning brought news. Inspector Craddock had questioned Giles Corey. The farmer admitted his grudge against Ridley, but denied involvement. "Poison? Not my style. I'd use my fists." Yet Miss Marple recalled Corey's son, Peter, a clever lad working in Much Benham as a lab assistant. Access to chemicals, perhaps. She decided to visit the post office. Mrs. Murgatroyd, the postmistress, was bustling about. Those cards? Slipped under the door at night. Elsie found them. And the morning they were delivered, busy. Oh, yes. Colonel Bantry collecting a parcel. Miss Price, too. Bags on the counter. Might have got switched. Miss Marple's eyes sparkled. Switched? How intriguing. Back home, she pondered. If bags switched, postcards might have too. Suppose the poisoned one was meant for another. Bantry, with his military secrets. Or Ridley, hiding theft. The puzzle deepened, each revelation peeling back layers of village life. Secrets simmered beneath the surface. Bantry's youthful indiscretion, whispered in clubs. Ridley's fudged accounts. Dane's shadowed past. And Miss Price, the unwitting victim, her death a catalyst, exposing them all. As night fell, Miss Marple gazed out her window. The lane was quiet, but danger lurked. Who held the typewriter? Who mixed the deadly ink? The answers hovered tantalizingly close in the inquest's echoes and the ink's fatal stain. Chapter 3. The Post Office Mix-Up. The morning mist clung to the cobblestones of St. Mary Mead like a reluctant ghost, slowly dissipating as the sun climbed higher. Miss Jane Marple stepped out of her cottage, her shawl draped neatly over her shoulders, a basket swinging from her arm as if she were merely on a routine errand. But her purpose was far from ordinary. The revelations from the inquest and her subsequent conversations had ignited a spark of curiosity that demanded satisfaction. The post office, that unassuming hub of village communication, held the key to a potential blunder that could unravel the entire mystery. The post office was a quaint building squeezed between the bakery and the greengrocer's, its red brick facade adorned with a faded sign that creaked in the breeze. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of paper, ink, and the faint tang of sealing wax. Behind the counter, Mrs. Agatha Murgatroyd, the postmistress, reigned supreme, a formidable woman in her 50s, with steel-grey hair pinned in a severe bun and eyes that missed little. Her assistant, young Elsie Holland, a girl of 19 with rosy cheeks and a tendency to flutter like a startled bird, was sorting stamps with nervous efficiency. "Good morning, Mrs. Murgatroyd," Miss Marple greeted, her voice mild and unthreatening. "And Elsie, dear, I hope I'm not interrupting." Mrs. Murgatroyd looked up from her ledger, her pen hovering. "Miss Marple." "Not at all. What can I do for you? Posting a letter to your nephew, perhaps?" "Actually, no," Miss Marple replied, setting her basket on the counter. "I've come about those postcards. The ones that caused such a stir." Elsie's hands trembled, scattering a few stamps. "Oh, those dreadful things! Poor Miss Price! I can hardly believe it!" Mrs. Murgatroyd shot her a stern glance. "Mind your work, Elsie." "Yes, Miss Marple, the inspector has already been here, poking about. What more is there to say?" Miss Marple leaned in slightly, her eyes twinkling with gentle persistence. "Just a few details, if you don't mind. You mentioned to Inspector Craddock that the postcards were slipped under the door overnight. No envelope, just the bundle?" "That's right," Mrs. Murgatroyd confirmed, her tone brisk. "Found them first thing, addressed but no stamps. Odd, but not unheard of. Sometimes folks drop things off that way to save a penny. And you sorted them yourself, Elsie?" Miss Marple turned to the girl, who nodded vigorously. "Yes, ma'am. I put them in the delivery slots for Mr. Polk. Vicarage, chemist, shop, and Melchett Manor, all straightforward." Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully. "And the morning was busy, I understand." "Colonel Bantry and Miss Price were here collecting parcels." Elsie blushed, her fingers twisting a stamp. "Yes, it was hectic. The Colonel had a big package from London, some books, I think, and Miss Price was picking up her weekly order of notions. They were both at the counter at the same time, chatting about the weather or something." Mrs. Murgatroyd interjected. "Elsie served them while I was in the back, but everything was in order." "Perhaps not entirely," Miss Marple murmured. "You mentioned bags getting switched." Elsie gasped. "How did you know?" "Well, not switched exactly, but muddled. The Colonel set his bag down. It's that old leather one with the brass clasp. And Miss Price had her wicker basket. They were reaching for parcels, and for a moment things got jumbled. I think the Colonel grabbed the wrong one first, laughed about it, and they sorted it out." Miss Marple's mind raced. A jumble at the counter. Could a postcard have been misplaced then? And the postcards, were they on the counter too? No, Elsie said quickly. They were in the slots behind. But wait, Miss Price asked if there was mail for her, and I handed her the postcard right then since she was here. Saved Mr. Polk a trip. Mrs. Murgatroyd frowned. You did? I don't recall that. Elsie faltered. Well, perhaps I did. It was busy, like I said. Miss Marple pressed gently. Think carefully, dear. Did you hand Miss Price her postcard here, or did Mr. Polk deliver it later? Elsie bit her lip, her eyes darting. Now that I think, no, I gave it to her. She tucked it in her basket and left. The Colonel got his too. Wait, no, he didn't ask. His was delivered later. A discrepancy. Miss Marple filed it away. And Colonel Bantry, did he handle any other mail? He glanced at the slots, joked about expecting a bill, Elsie recalled, but he only took his parcel. Thanking them, Miss Marple departed, her steps light, but her thoughts heavy. A mix-up indeed. Perhaps the poisoned card was intended for the Colonel, slipped into Miss Price's basket by accident during the confusion. Her next destination was the vicarage, where Mrs. Dane was tending her rose garden. The vicar's wife straightened, brushing soil from her gloves. Jane, come for a cuppa? Gladly, Miss Marple accepted, following her inside. Over tea, she steered the conversation to the postcards. Did you collect yours at the post office, or was it delivered? Delivered by Mr. Polk, Mrs. Dane said. I was out visiting the sick when it arrived. The vicar took it in. And Mr. Ridley. He mentioned picking it up early, before opening the shop. Another thread. Miss Marple excused herself and headed to the chemist's. Mr. Ridley was dispensing cough syrup to a customer. He nodded her in. Miss Marple again. Persistent, aren't you? Merely thorough, she smiled. Your postcard. Did you fetch it from the post office? Ridley paused. Yes, popped in first thing. Elsie handed it over. Why? Just clarifying timelines. She noted his unease, the way his eyes avoided hers. As she left, a shadow crossed her path. Peter Corey, Giles's son, striding toward the Blue Borough. Tall, with sharp features and a lab coat peeking from his bag, he worked in Much Benham's pharmacy. Access to cyanide, she thought. She followed discreetly, entering the inn. Peter was at the bar, ordering ale. Miss Marple took a table nearby, ordering sherry. Eavesdropping, she heard him mutter to the barkeep about settling scores. Intrigued, she approached. Peter Corey, how's your father? He turned, surprised. Miss Marple, father's fine, grumbling as usual. And you, still at the lab? Yes, compounding medicines, exciting stuff. His sarcasm was evident. Like inks, perhaps, she ventured mildly. He stiffened. Inks? No, pharmaceuticals. Why? Just curious about poisons. Cyanide, for instance. Peter's face paled. That's restricted. I don't handle it lightly. Of course. She smiled and left, his reaction noted. Back home, she pondered over lunch. The mix-up suggested error, but was it? Perhaps deliberate misdirection. Afternoon brought Inspector Craddock to her door. Miss Marple, your insights are invaluable. Any thoughts? She shared the post office details. A switch, Inspector. The poisoned card might have been for Colonel Bantry. Craddock's eyes widened. Bantry. Motive. Old secrets. Ask about his army days. He nodded, departing. Miss Marple visited Melchett Manor. Dolly Bantry welcomed her. Jane. Arthur's out shooting. Perfect. Tell me about Arthur's past. Dolly hesitated. Well, there was a scandal. Embezzlement accusation cleared but lingering. And Miss Price knew. Yes, she was friends with the accuser's sister. A link. As evening fell, Miss Marple walked the lanes piecing it. Peter Corey, overhearing his father's tales of Bantry's disgrace, perhaps sought revenge. A sudden rustle, someone following. She quickened pace, heart pounding. At her gate, she turned. No one. Inside, she locked up, mind alert. The mix-up was the crux, but danger loomed. The next day, she confronted Peter at the farm. "You know about the postcards." He denied, but sweat beaded his brow. "Your lab, cyanide access." "It's not me," he burst. "I borrowed the vicarage typewriter for letters, but nothing else." The typewriter, another clue. Miss Marple left, satisfied. The web tightened, suspects circling. Village whispers grew. More. Postcards? No, false alarm. She met Craddock again. Check Peter's alibis. He agreed. As chapter closed, suspense built. What next revelation? Chapter 4. The Shadow of Motive. The autumn wind whispered through the bare branches of St. Mary Mead's ancient oaks, carrying with it a chill that seemed to seep into the very bones of the village. Shadows lengthened earlier each day, mirroring the darkening suspicions that now clouded every conversation and glance. Miss Jane Marple, undeterred by the gathering gloom, set out once more, her sensible shoes crunching on fallen leaves as she pursued the elusive thread of motive. For in her experience, murder was seldom random. It was the culmination of hidden desires, festering grudges, and secrets long buried but never forgotten. Her first port of call was the Blue Boar Inn, where the locals gathered like moths to a flame, drawn by the warmth of the fire and the allure of shared tales. The inn's low-beamed ceiling and worn oak tables bore witness to countless confidences exchanged over frothy pints. Miss Marple entered quietly, ordering a modest glass of elderflower cordial, and positioning herself in a corner booth from which she could observe without drawing attention. The bar was alive with chatter. Old Mr. Pettigrew, the retired schoolmaster, held court with a group of farmers. "Mark my words," he declared, his pipe gesturing emphatically. "It's that Ridley fellow. Always mixing potions in his shop. Easy for him to whip up something deadly." A burly man in tweeds shook his head. "Nah, it's Corey. Him and Ridley been at loggerheads for months, and his boy's got that fancy job in town, knows all about chemicals." Miss Marple's ears perked up. She recalled her encounter with Peter Corey, his defensive posture and quick denials. Motive, she thought, often hid in the shadows of family loyalty. Slipping into the conversation with her usual tact, she approached the group. "Gentlemen, forgive an old woman's curiosity, but what exactly was this quarrel between Mr. Ridley and Mr. Corey?" Pettigrew puffed on his pipe. "Ah, Miss Marple, it started over a bad batch of liniment for Corey's cows. Cost him a fortune in vet bills. He accused Ridley of sabotage, said he'd ruin him. Shouting match in the high street it was. And young Peter?" she inquired mildly. The burly man snorted. "Peter's always defending his dad. Hot-headed lad. Works at that lab in Much Benham. Handles all sorts of nasties." Thanking them, Miss Marple departed, her mind abuzz. Motive for Peter, protecting his father's honour. But was it enough for murder? Her path led next to Giles Corey's farm, a rambling property on the village outskirts, where fields stretched like patchwork quilts under the grey sky. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the distant lowing of cattle added a rustic symphony. Corey himself answered her knock. A rugged figure in muddied boots and a worn cap, his face weathered by years of toil. "Miss Marple?" "What brings you here?" Not buying eggs, I reckon." She smiled disarmingly. "No, Mr. Corey, though your hens are legendary. I'm here about the unfortunate business with Miss Price and your disagreement with Mr. Ridley." Corey's eyes narrowed, but he ushered her into the kitchen, where a kettle whistled on the stove. "Tea," he grunted. "Delightful." As he poured, she observed the room. Simple, functional, with a shotgun mounted above the hearth. "You were quite angry with him, I hear." Corey slammed a cup down. "Damned right. His faulty medicine nearly killed my herd. But poison? That's not me. I'd face a man head on. And your son, Peter? He seems devoted to you." Corey softened slightly. "Good boy, Peter. Smart as a whip. But he's no killer. Works hard in town, sends money home." Miss Marple sipped her tea. "Does he ever mention Colonel Bantry or old village tales?" Corey frowned. "Bantry? Why, Peter don't care for gentry folk. But yeah, I've told him stories. Bantry's dodgy past, that embezzlement scandal. Cleared, they say, but mud sticks." Her pulse quickened. So Peter knew. "And the postcards? Did you receive one?" "No," Corey said flatly. "Why would I?" Leaving the farm, Miss Marple pondered. No postcard for Corey, but his grudge against Ridley, and knowledge of Bantry's secret via Peter. Motives intertwined like vines. Afternoon found her at the vicarage, where the Reverend Dane was in his study, surrounded by dusty tomes and sermon notes. Mrs. Dane, ever the gracious hostess, served scones in the parlour. "Jane, you've been busy," she said, her eyes anxious. "Any progress?" Miss Marple buttered a scone. "Progress comes in whispers, Elspeth. Tell me more about that old parish incident." Mrs. Dane glanced at the door. "It was before St. Mary Mead. A young woman claimed the vicar. Well, impropriety, nothing proven, malicious gossip. But Lavinia was there, knew the family. She could have stirred it up again." "And Mr. Ridley?" "He provided tonics for the vicar's nerves during the ordeal. Discreet fellow, but perhaps he overheard things. The vicar entered then, his face lined with fatigue. 'Miss Marple, seeking enlightenment?' 'In a manner of speaking, Reverend.' 'Your typewriter. Mr. Ridley borrowed it, and Peter Corey too, I believe.' Dane nodded. 'Yes, for parish work. Open to all. Convenient, she thought. Access for suspects.' Bidding farewell, Miss Marple walked to Melchett Manor, where Dolly Bantry was pruning roses. 'Jane, join me for sherry.' 'Inside by the fire,' Dolly confided. 'Arthur's rattled. That postcard. Truth will out. Reminds him of India, that mess with funds.' 'Embezzlement?' Miss Marple prompted gently. Dolly nodded. 'Accused of skimming regimental funds. Court-martial avoided, but whispers followed him home. Lavinia's brother was in the regiment. New details. Motive for silencing Bantry, but via Price, or misdirected. Evening brought a surprise. Inspector Craddock at her cottage. 'Miss Marple, Peter's alibi is shaky. Says he was home, but no witness. And he admits borrowing the typewriter.' 'Interesting,' she murmured. 'Check his lab logs for cyanide.' Craddock agreed. As he left, a note slipped under her door. 'Stop meddling. Unsigned.' Heart racing, she bolted the door. Motive now personal. Someone feared her. Next day, she visited Ridley's shop incognito, browsing remedies. 'Nervous lately, Mr. Ridley?' He startled. 'Who isn't? This murder? Your secret? The fudged books?' His face strained. 'How? It was years ago, a mistake. If it came out.' Motive for him, too. Silence a threat. Village tension mounted. Whispers of another death. Miss Marple, undaunted, pieced motives, revenge, protection, concealment. A clandestine meeting observed. Peter and Elsie at the inn, heads close. Romance or conspiracy? Confronting Elsie. You and Peter, Elsie confessed. We're sweethearts. He hates Bantry for slighting his dad. Motive deepened. Suspense peaked. A shadow at her window. Who lurked? Chapter 5. The Clue in the Type. The village of St. Mary Mead awoke to a sky bruised with clouds, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Miss Jane Marple, undeterred by the ominous weather or the cryptic warning notes still tucked in her drawer, sat by her parlour window, her knitting needles idle for once. The menacing words, "Stop meddling," had only sharpened her resolve. In her long experience, such threats often signalled a truth perilously close to exposure. Today she intended to pursue a lead that had crystallised in her mind, the typewriter, that mechanical harbinger of the postcard's cryptic messages. Her morning began with a purposeful visit to the vicarage, where the typewriter in question resided. The vicarage was a rambling house, its ivy-clad walls exuding an air of quiet piety. Mrs. Elspeth Dane greeted her with a weary smile, her eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. "Jane, you're a brave soul to be out in this gloom. Come in, tea's brewing." As they settled in the parlour, Miss Marple steered the conversation delicately. "Elspeth, I've been thinking about that typewriter in the vicar's study. You mentioned it's used for parish work, but also borrowed by others." Mrs. Dane nodded, pouring tea. "Oh yes, it's an old imperial, clunky but reliable. Mr. Ridley used it for his accounts last month, and young Peter Corey borrowed it for some letters. Parish fundraising, he said. Even I've pecked at it for the church newsletter." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "And no one else, no visitors perhaps, who might have had access." Mrs. Dane frowned, her teaspoon pausing. "Not that I recall. The study's open to parishioners, but it's mostly the regulars. Why do you ask?" "Just tying loose ends," Miss Marple replied, her tone light but her mind racing. The typewriter's accessibility made it a pivotal clue, but its users, Ridley, Peter, and possibly others, narrowed. The field she requested to see the machine, and Mrs. Dane led her to the study. A cosy room lined with books and smelling faintly of pipe smoke. The typewriter sat on a sturdy oak desk, its keys worn but gleaming under a shaft of grey light. Miss Marple leaned closer, noting the faint misalignment of the lowercase e and the slight smudge of the capital T. "May I try it?" she asked. "Of course," Mrs. Dane said, curious. Miss Marple typed a quick line, "The quick fox jumps," and examined the result. The E tilted left, the T faintly blurred. She tucked the paper into her handbag, thanking Mrs. Dane warmly. Her next stop was the Blue Boar Inn, where she hoped to catch Inspector Craddock. The inn was quieter today, the lunchtime crowd thinned by the drizzle. Craddock was at a corner table, poring over notes. He looked up, a wry smile breaking his serious demeanour. "Miss Marple, you're tireless. What's on your mind?" She produced the typed sample. "Inspector, could you compare this to the postcards?" "The vicarage typewriter, I believe, is the key." Craddock's eyebrows rose. "You think it's the one?" "We've been chasing typewriter models, but nothing definitive." "I'll send this to Wilkins at once. And Peter Corey's lab logs," she pressed. "Checked." He signed out cyanide for a legitimate experiment, but the quantity matches stock. No theft. Still, his alibi's weak. Miss Marple nodded, filing this away. "And Elsie Holland? Any background?" Craddock hesitated. "She's clean but nervous. Admitted to seeing Peter romantically. Swears she knows nothing of the postcards." Thanking him, Miss Marple braved the rain to visit the post office. Mrs. Murgatroyd was alone, Elsie off for the day. "Back again, Miss Marple," the postmistress said, her tone a mix of amusement and suspicion. "Just a query," Miss Marple said. "That morning the postcards were sorted. Did anyone linger at the counter besides Colonel Bantry and Miss Price?" Mrs. Murgatroyd thought. "Now you mention it, Peter Corey was in, dropping off a package for his father. Didn't stay long, but he was near the slots. A new piece." Miss Marple left, her mind turning. Peter at the post office, with access to the cards. But why poison one? Afternoon saw her at the chemist's shop. Mr. Ridley was alone, his usual composure fraying. "Miss Marple, I'm a busy man. What now?" She smiled disarmingly. "I won't keep you." "That typewriter you borrowed, did you use it for anything besides accounts?" His eyes flickered. "No, just ledgers. Why? And the postcard. The reckoning comes. It upset you?" Ridley's jaw tightened. Anyone would be upset. "I've no secrets worth killing for." But his hands trembled, betraying him. Miss Marple noted a locked drawer behind the counter. "You keep records there?" "Private papers," he snapped. "Nothing to do with—" This she departed, unconvinced. Ridley's secret, fudged books perhaps, made him a target or a perpetrator. Evening brought an unexpected visitor. Dolly Bantry, breathless and flushed. "Jane, I had to come. Arthur's been odd. Locked himself in his study, burning papers." "That postcard's got him rattled," Miss Marple offered sherry. "Burning papers? Interesting. Anything specific?" Dolly lowered her voice. "Old letters from India. He says it's nothing, but I saw one with a regimental crest, mentioned a debt. Miss Marple's mind connected dots. Bantry's scandal, Price's knowledge, a motive for silence. After Dolly left, Miss Marple sat by the fire, piecing it together. The typewriter linked Ridley and Peter. The post office mix-up suggested error, but Peter's presence there hinted at intent. And Bantry's burning papers, hiding evidence. The next morning, Craddock arrived with news. The typewriter matches. The Vicarage Imperial typed the postcards. "We're narrowing users. Excellent," Miss Marple said. "Focus on Peter and Ridley and check Bantry's military records." Craddock nodded, but added, "A complication. Elsie's gone missing. Left a note saying she's visiting family, but no one's seen her." Miss Marple's heart sank. Elsie, in love with Peter, might know too much. Find her, Inspector. Quickly she ventured to Corey's farm, where Giles was mending a fence. "Peter's in town," he grunted. "What's he done now?" "Nothing proven," she soothed. "But he was at the post office that morning." "Did he mention it?" Giles shook his head. "Boy's been quiet lately." "Worried about me, I reckon." Returning home, Miss Marple found a second note under her door. "Leave it alone, or else." Her pulse quickened, but she tucked it away. At dusk, she visited the church, seeking quiet reflection. The vicar was polishing candlesticks. "Miss Marple, you look troubled." "Merely thoughtful," she replied. "That typewriter. Anyone else used it recently?" He thought. Just Ridley, Peter, and Mrs. Croft for the bazaar flyer. Mrs. Croft. A new name. The stout witness from the shop. Unlikely, but worth noting. Night fell, and Miss Marple heard footsteps outside. Peering out, she saw a figure. Peter? Too dark to tell. She locked her windows. The next day, Craddock reported, "Elsie's back." Said she panicked, needed air. Claims no knowledge of the murder. Miss Marple met Elsie at the post office. "You're safe, dear." But Peter, did he ever talk of Bantry? Elsie's eyes welled. "He hates him." Says Bantry ruined his father's name years ago. Some deal gone sour. Motive confirmed. But was Elsie complicit? Miss Marple confronted Peter at the Blue Boar. You typed the postcards, didn't you? He paled. I wrote letters, yes, but not those cards. You were at the post office. You knew Bantry's. Secret I didn't kill anyone, he shouted, drawing eyes. She left, heart pounding. The typewriter, the mix-up, the motives, all pointed to Peter, but the puzzle wasn't complete. Craddock called later. Bantry's records show a hushed-up loan to a junior officer, Price's brother. Never repaid a final piece. Miss Marple sat, knitting resumed, as rain lashed the windows. Peter, protecting his father, targeting Bantry, but Price died. A tragic error, or a deeper game? Suspense hung thick. Who watched from the shadows? Chapter 6. The True Target. The Sunday morning bells of St. Mary Mead's church tolled solemnly, their echoes weaving through the village like a call to reckoning. The sky, heavy with pewter clouds, cast a pall over the cobblestone lanes, and a damp chill clung to the air, as if nature itself sensed the weight of secrets about to be unveiled. Miss Jane Marple, clad in her Sunday best, a black dress with a touch of lace at the collar, sat in her usual pew, her prayer book open, but her eyes wandering. She observed the congregation with the keenness of a hawk. Colonel Arthur Bantry, stiff in his suit, his face pale beneath his weathered tan. Mrs. Elspeth Dane, her hands clasped tightly around a rosary. Mr. Thomas Ridley, fidgeting as if the pew were lined with thorns. And young Peter Corey, seated at the back, his eyes darting nervously. The air was thick with unspoken tensions, and Miss Marple felt the threads of the mystery drawing taut. During the sermon, the Reverend Dane spoke of truth and redemption, his words resonant yet tinged with a personal tremor. Miss Marple's mind, however, was elsewhere, piecing together the mosaic of clues. The poisoned postcard, the vicarage typewriter, the post office mix-up, and the web of motives binding Bantry, Ridley, and Peter. The threatening notes under her door, "Stop meddling and leave it alone or else," only sharpened her focus. In her experience, such warnings were the desperate flailings of a cornered mind. As the congregation rose for the final hymn, Miss Marple's gaze lingered on Colonel Bantry. His postcard, "Truth Will Out," had stirred a memory from years past, whispered in drawing rooms. A youthful indiscretion in India, a hushed-up scandal involving misappropriated regimental funds and a loan to a junior officer, Lavinia Price's brother, that was never repaid. Bantry's burning of old letters, as Dolly had confided, suggested a man fearful of exposure. Could the poisoned postcard meant for him have been taken by Miss Price in that fateful post office muddle? After the service, Miss Marple lingered in the churchyard, exchanging pleasantries with villagers while her mind worked. Mrs. Amelia Croft, the stout witness to Miss Price's collapse, approached, her face flushed with gossip. "Miss Marple, have you heard? They say Peter Corey's been seen sneaking about at night. Up to no good. I'll wager." Miss Marple smiled, as gently. "Gossip can be misleading, Mrs. Croft. But thank you." She noted the woman's eagerness, perhaps too eager. An unlikely suspect, but her presence at the shop that morning warranted a second look. Her next move was deliberate, an invitation to Melchett Manor for lunch, extended by Dolly Bantry, who was eager for updates. The Manor's dining room, with its polished mahogany and ancestral portraits, felt oppressively grand under the day's grey light. Colonel Bantry, unusually subdued, joined them, his fork moving mechanically through roast beef. "Arthur, you're quiet," Dolly remarked, her tone teasing but concerned. "Lot on my mind," he muttered, avoiding Miss Marple's gaze. She seized the moment. "Colonel, I've been thinking about those postcards. Truth will out," such a pointed phrase. Almost as if someone knew of a past matter, you'd rather forget Bantry's fork paused, his knuckles whitening. "Nonsense. Just a prank gone wrong." Miss Marple's voice was soft but probing. "Perhaps. But if someone wished to silence a secret, say an old regimental matter, they might use a clever ruse. Like poisoned ink on a postcard meant for you." Dolly gasped, her napkin fluttering. "Jane, you think Arthur was the target?" Bantry's face reddened, but he remained silent, his eyes fixed on his plate. Miss Marple pressed gently. "Miss Price took your postcard by mistake, didn't she?" At the post office, when the bags were muddled, his silence was answer enough. Dolly's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Arthur, why didn't you say?" "Nothing to say," he growled, but his voice lacked conviction. Miss Marple sipped her water, her mind racing. Bantry's reaction confirmed her theory. The poison card was his, misdirected by chance. But who had the motive and means to target him? Leaving the manor, she walked to the Blue Boar Inn, where Inspector Craddock was reviewing statements. He greeted her with a mix of respect and exasperation. "Miss Marple, you're a step ahead, as always." "We've confirmed the typewriter match, and Peter's lab logs are clean, but his movements that morning are vague." "And Elsie Holland," she asked, "still claims ignorance, but she's protective of Peter. We're watching her." Miss Marple nodded. "Inspector, consider this. The postcards were a distraction, meant to sow fear among several, but only one was poisoned. For Colonel Bantry, I believe, due to his past, Craddock's pen paused. Bantry? But why Price? The mix-up. Elsie's account, confused as it was, suggests the cards were swapped." He scribbled furiously. "I'll dig deeper into Bantry's history." And Peter's alibi. As evening fell, Miss Marple visited the post office, now closed, to speak with Elsie privately. She found the girl at home, a modest cottage behind the bakery. Elsie, pale and jumpy, let her in. "Miss Marple, I don't know anything. More, I swear, dear, I'm not accusing you," Miss Marple soothed. "But Peter, his feelings about Colonel Bantry run deep, don't they?" Elsie's eyes filled. "He's angry, yes. Says Bantry cheated his father years ago, a land deal that went sour, but he'd never kill. Did he ever mention the postcards to you?" "No. He was as shocked as me when Miss Price died." Miss Marple patted her hand. "You're a loyal girl, Elsie. But if you remember anything, come to me." Leaving, she felt a chill, not from the air, but from a sense of being watched. She hurried home, locking her door. The second note, "Leave it alone or else," weighed heavily. Peter or another? The next morning she called on Giles Corey at his farm. He was stacking hay, his face set in a scowl. "Miss Marple, this is getting old." "What now?" "Your son's loyalty is admirable," she said. "But his hatred for Bantry, did he ever act on it?" Corey's eyes flashed. "Peter's a good lad. He talks big, but he's no murderer." "Did he visit the post office often?" "Sometimes for me." Dropped off parcels. She left unconvinced. Peter's presence at the post office, his typewriter access, his motive, all pointed to him. But Elsie's loyalty suggested another layer. Afternoon brought a surprise. Mrs. Croft bustling into Miss Marple's cottage uninvited. I've something to say, Miss Marple. I saw Peter that morning, loitering by the post office before it opened. Looked shifty. Miss Marple's eyebrows rose. Indeed? Did he see you? No, I was across the street buying bread. A witness or a meddler? Mrs. Croft's eagerness was suspicious, but her testimony strengthened the case against Peter. Craddock arrived soon after. Miss Marple, we've got something. Bantry's loan to Price's brother was tied to the scandal, hushed up to save his career. And Peter's been seen near Bantry's estate at odd hours. Spying, she mused, or planning? She decided to confront Peter directly, finding him at the farm, repairing a tractor. Peter, we must talk. The postcards, the typewriter, your grudge against Bantry. It's a dangerous pattern. He stood, wiping oil from his hands, his face pale. I told you, I didn't do it. Yes, I hate Bantry. His deal ruined my father's chances at that land, but I only typed letters. For whom? For parish work. And Elsie, love letters. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. And the cyanide. I used it for lab work under supervision. She left, unconvinced. His denials were fervent, but cracks showed. That evening at the vicarage, she examined the typewriter again, alone with the vicar's permission. She typed another sample, noting the same quirks. A scrap of paper in the waste bin caught her eye. A draft of a postcard message. Your sins find you. In Peter's hand? She pocketed it, heart racing. Shh. Home, a third note awaited. Final warning. Her resolve hardened. Meeting Craddock at dawn, she shared the scrap. Peter's handwriting. He's involved, but perhaps not alone. Craddock nodded. We're bringing him in. As rain began, Miss Marple sat by her fire, piecing it. Peter targeting Bantry, but Price died. Elsie's loyalty, Croft's testimony, Bantry's fear, all converged. The true target was clear, but the puppet master. Suspense thickened. A knock at her door. Friend or foe? Chapter 7. The Unveiling. The dusk of St. Mary Mead settled like a heavy curtain. The village lanes cloaked in a twilight that seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, and the distant hoot of an owl added an eerie note to the evening. Miss Jane Marple, her resolve as firm as the oak beams of her cottage, had decided that the time for unravelling the tangled threads of this mystery had come. The threatening notes, stop meddling, leave it alone or else, and the chilling final warning lay on her sideboard, silent accusations that only fueled her determination. In her experience, truth was a stubborn thing, surfacing like a buried root when prodded with patience and precision. She had invited Inspector Derek Craddock, the Bantrys, Mr. Ridley, Mrs. Dane and young Peter Corey to the vicarage that evening, ostensibly for a parish meeting to discuss the upcoming harvest festival. The Reverend Dane, though puzzled, agreed to host, his study transformed into a makeshift stage for revelation. The room, with its book-lined walls and flickering firelight, felt both intimate and oppressive as the group gathered, their faces a gallery of unease. Mrs. Dane, ever the gracious hostess, served tea, her hands trembling slightly as she passed cups. Colonel Bantry sat rigidly, his military bearing at odds with the nervous twitch of his moustache. Dolly Bantry, beside him, clutched a lace handkerchief, her eyes darting between her husband and Miss Marple. Mr. Ridley, his chemist's coat replaced by a sombre suit, perched on the edge of his chair, his fingers drumming a silent rhythm. Peter Corey stood by the window, his youthful face pale and defiant, while Elsie Holland, summoned at Miss Marple's insistence, hovered near him, her gaze anxious. Inspector Craddock, notebook in hand, stood by the door, his expression one of cautious anticipation. Miss Marple rose, her slight figure commanding attention with the quiet authority of one who sees beyond the surface. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice soft but clear. "This tragic affair, the death of Miss Lavinia Price, has cast a shadow over our village, but tonight I believe we can bring light to the darkness." A murmur rippled through the room, quickly hushed as she continued. "The postcards, those cryptic messages, were no mere prank. They were a carefully crafted net, designed to ensnare one among us. But a mistake, a simple mix-up at the post office, turned a warning into murder." Colonel Bantry shifted, his face reddening. "What's this about, Miss Marple?" "Get to the point." She smiled faintly. "Patience, Colonel. Let us begin with the postcards." Each bore a typed message, crafted on the vicarage typewriter, with its distinctive misaligned E and smudged T. "Truth will out for you, Colonel. Judgment Day approaches for Mrs. Dane. The reckoning comes for Mr. Ridley, and for poor Miss Price, your past catches up." Only hers carried poison, cyanide in the ink, absorbed through the skin. Mrs. Dane gasped, her cup clattering. "But why Lavinia?" "Because," Miss Marple said, her eyes steady, "she was not the intended victim. The poisoned card was meant for Colonel Bantry. A collective intake of breath." Bantry's face drained of colour. "Me? Preposterous. Is it?" Miss Marple's tone was gentle but unyielding. "Years ago in India, you faced a scandal. Accusations of embezzling regimental funds, hushed up to save your career. A junior officer, Miss Price's brother, was involved, wasn't he? A loan you gave him, never repaid, tied to that affair. Miss Price knew through her brother's letters. Her knowledge was a threat. Dolly clutched her husband's arm. "Arthur, is this true?" Bantry's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Old history." Cleared, but it haunted me. Miss Marple turned to the post office mix-up. "That morning, Colonel, you and Miss Price were at the counter, your bags muddled. Elsie, you handed Miss Price a postcard, thinking it hers. But it was the Colonel's, laced with poison, meant to silence him." Elsie's eyes widened. I didn't know." "I believe you," Miss Marple said kindly, "but someone did. Someone with access to the vicarage typewriter, knowledge of cyanide, and a grudge against the Colonel." All eyes turned to Peter Corey, who stepped back, his face ashen. "Not me, I swear." Miss Marple's gaze softened. "Peter, your loyalty to your father, Giles, is admirable. He told you of a land deal gone sour, blamed on Colonel Bantry's influence. You saw it as an injustice, didn't you? A chance to right a wrong. Peter's fists clenched. "He cheated my father!" "But I didn't kill anyone." "Perhaps not intentionally," she said. "You typed the postcards using the vicarage typewriter to stir fear. A warning to Bantry, perhaps, to expose his past. But one card you treated with cyanide, obtained from your lab in Much Benham. You slipped the bundle under the post office door, expecting the Colonel to receive the deadly one." "No!" Peter cried, his voice breaking. "I typed them, yes, to scare him. But I didn't poison anything." Miss Marple held up the scrap of paper from the vicarage waste bin. "This, in your hand, matches the postcard style. And you were seen near the post office that morning. Before it opened, Craddock stepped forward. 'Peter, we've checked your lab. A vial of cyanide went missing, not recorded.' Peter's shoulders slumped. tears welling. I meant to frighten him, not kill. I got the cyanide, mixed it with ink, but only for a trace, to make him ill, not die. I didn't know Miss Price would get it." The room fell silent, the weight of his confession settling like dust. Elsie sobbed, reaching for him, but Craddock restrained her gently. Miss Marple continued, her voice steady. "The mix-up was your undoing, Peter." Miss Price, in her haste, took the Colonel's card. "Her death was a tragic accident, but your intent was clear." Ridley spoke, his voice hoarse. "And me? Why my postcard?" "A distraction," Miss Marple said, "to muddy the waters. Your secret, fudged accounts made you a plausible target, as did Mrs. Dane's past rumours. But the true aim was Colonel Bantry." Mrs. Dane clutched a rosary. "Then we were all pawns." "In a way," Miss Marple said. "Peter's plan was clever, but human error, Elsie's mix-up, turned it deadly." Craddock nodded. "Peter Corey, you're under arrest for the murder of Lavinia Price and attempted murder of Colonel Bantry." As Peter was led away, Elsie's cries echoed. Bantry stood, his face a mask of relief and guilt. "I never meant for this," he muttered. Dolly embraced him. "It's over, Arthur." Miss Marple gathered her shawl, her work done. Outside, the rain had stopped, stars piercing the night. She walked home, her mind quiet but alert. The village would heal, but secrets, she knew, would always simmer beneath. Back in her cottage, she resumed her knitting, the needles clicking in rhythm with her thoughts. "People," she murmured, "are so careless with their secrets." The case closed, but St. Mary Mead's lanes whispered of new tales, waiting for her sharp eyes.